Moves to Angular, suddenly starts using Windows.
Oof,
What a way to start. There we go.
it's a slippery slope.
What a way to start. Take us away, Skulk.
Oh, geez. Am I Mr. Angular now? So yeah. Let's not. Isn't Angular like Google? But anyway, let's not get into that. Let me also just remove my thing here. All right. So welcome to today's JavaScript Breakpoint. There's been a couple of things that has happened recently. One of them being the React suspense drama. Other one is some TypeScript, like some big TypeScript news coming up, and so forth. But we have a general tendency to try and bite off too much instead of too little. So I think what we have decided. Well, I think everyone here is individually contributes to that in their own special way. But yeah, so I tend to bite off more, and then like you guys don't chew enough or fast enough. That's the problem. But yeah, see, we're already on it. Okay, so today we're going to chat about state of JS. That it's a bit late. It was the state of JS from last year that came out now, but the survey, as I understand it, was only released last week. Is that correct? Does anyone want to correct me on that?
Let me confirm. I will never miss an
Let's look at the LinkedIn.
to correct Skulk.
State of JS. Let me just check. Or are we late to the party?
But the results of the major annual are now out. Yeah, it came out like this last week or this week or something.
Yeah. Okay.
So
someone on. Okay. All right. Yeah. So it took a while. So it's last year's one, but better late than never. So let's get into it. If I can find it again.
Are you having some Windows problems there?
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Yeah. I'm representing the little guy. The developer who uses Windows and who's doing a lot of Angular work recently. All right, so I think let's dive into it. So first and foremost, if we look at the, I think I have a Figma. Yes, all right. So if we look at it this way, in terms of when we look at the demographics, I think they're no big surprises here. US, quite big. France, Germany. Interesting that France and Germany, there were more respondents than the UK.
I wonder how that sorting works. They're like, what's with the France bias? Is there like a decimal point? Is it like an alphabetical thing?
It's probably rounded and they take into consideration I don't know. But
sorting is fun.
Yes, but South Africa didn't even make the list. So we are chucked in down here with over limit. Okay.
Over 9,000.
Over 9,000. All right. And then, so language.
How many? 18,000 almost respondents here. 17,700.
Which is nothing to scoff about, though. So
I don't know. It's JavaScript related, so people will scoff.
That is true as well. But English, kind of, this is a given. In terms of survey completion time, I found it interesting that so many people dropped off right before the end.
I wonder what the last question was.
I filled it in and I can't remember anything really major.
Yeah, this is probably the more 23,000 is the cohort for the completion time, so that's probably the better full cohort. Okay, that makes sense.
But anyway, one thing that I find interesting, just going through this super quickly myself, is let me see, can I arrange it? Let's keep it this way. Is that I noticed that what's very interesting is there's more people in the 30 to 39 age range. I would have expected more people in their 20s.
I don't know. We're getting old now, Skull.
Yeah, like I think this is kind of all of us, except Ben. He's like in the above 60. Both Daniel and me, we're kind of in here.
Did you see that Iso Lang interview from the that YouTube channel that does all the interviews?
The parody stuff, the
parody stuff, the Iso Lang. I saw that, but anyone who hasn't seen that, go watch it. Like I was like, I want this to be me when I retire. Like this is my retirement plan. Like,
have you seen the new? Have you seen the new the Satan stack?
Theo reacted to this.
Yeah. This is pretty great.
I think Prime also did a reaction. It was quite funny.
It's pretty great. Okay, so I think what's interesting, why I find this specifically interesting, is because most people say they have between 4 and 6 years experience with JavaScript. So that means there's a lot of older-ish people that don't have that much experience with JavaScript. So I guess I'd chalk it up to people doing career changes or people who used to write other languages that are writing JavaScript now. I guess it's also
switch that tab at the top there versus yearly income. I just
that's a good question.
No. Go back to the.
No. This is a screenshot.
Okay. Yeah, I want to see what our peers are earning.
That is.
It's going to be North American salaries. It's going to make us sad, but let's see.
This is yearly income. Okay. Check this out.
That's lower than I thought. That's way lower than I thought for North Americans.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it seems like if you've been doing JavaScript for 20 years, you kind of earning less than someone who's been doing it for 7 years. If you haven't moved on to a proper language yet.
Like you're a dinosaur now in market economies.
If you're still doing JavaScript after 20 years, like you're not a good programmer. But it's so hard to really draw any conclusions from the stuff because, like, are we talking about TypeScript as well when we say years of JavaScript experience? Also, you know what counts as years of experience? Someone who's been doing one line of jQuery in their PHP code for the last 20 years, does that count as 20 years of JavaScript experience compared to someone who's been doing
a lot more than whatever it is I'm doing?
Yeah. So like you're effectively comparing someone who's been doing WASM for 1 year to someone who's maybe just been pulling in some jQuery.
I do get that, but like you do get a normalization effect on larger distributions. Like the p-values here aren't super great yet. The cohort's still a little bit small for me, but like you get some ideas here. So it like even $100,000 annually is not something to scoff at.
Yeah,
that's an interesting distribution there.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you've got pretty much uniform distribution there. That's wow.
Yeah, but I think one thing though is that obviously the bigger the size of the company, and I can say this for myself, the more specialized the work you do. I think if it's just you're probably doing freelance websites. So the type of JavaScript work you're doing is probably, along the lines of, hey, making something animate or whatever. Whereas if you're working for a company that has 1,000 plus, then you're probably doing some super specialized stuff. Like there's like some some DOM update that's really slow, or or whatever.
Well, it depends on if that company has product market fit or not, right? So
Fair enough.
You've
Fair
got
enough.
some startups with like 200-300 people in their engineering teams that don't
Yes.
have product market fit, and every single one of those people is going to be slapdashing some stuff together to try and
Yes.
figure out how to please the customer.
No, sure.
It's
So
more
I'm
about,
most.
like, and you can get super. Sorry but like you can also get super small teams. Like say the WhatsApp team. This is not JavaScript, but like the WhatsApp actual engineering team that's super small, but they're solving very specialist problems, and they've got specialist roles on that team. So the factor is more like, do we have product market fit, than it necessarily is team size. From my perspective,
Yeah, so I'm mostly looking at the lower bound. So sure, yeah, you can be a size of 1 and still be up here. But like looking at the lower bound, like there's definitely a threshold in terms of big companies. So my guess would be that if you're working for a massive company with lots of developers, they're probably not looking for someone who's just a JavaScript generalist. You probably need to have some in-depth knowledge of something. Whereas you can
wouldn't be able to retain them either, because like how can you give them their like methadone, which is the latest JavaScript library of them.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be able to do it. Like if I didn't get to look at Solid semi-seriously once a week, then what does life even mean to me?
Exactly. So yeah, yearly income. I think these are kind of pretty self-explanatory. This one as well.
That's quite sad.
I know, and this one as well. So yeah, guys, we gone goofed up diversity. Well done. Give yourself a pat on the back. Literally, guys.
This is not great.
This is. Yeah.
Most likely, this is very depressing.
I know. So yeah, we still have quite a way to go when it comes to diversity in JavaScript.
Now this survey is just a bunch of people mansplaining to us, right? Like so.
Well, at least they're mansplaining to other men, like the three of us, so we can handle it. So disability status, this I found very interesting, that cognitive impairments, kind of like way more cognitive impairments. So this is like anxiety, dyslexia, ADHD, way more than hearing or visual impairments. Which
I'm interested to see why autism is labeled as autism and not like categorized as a neurodivergent spectrum.
Oh, interesting. I didn't.
Because depending on like some people do think of neurodivergent spectrum things as cognitive impairment, but it's not really correct.
Yeah.
Because they're ASD.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. But so I think they got this from the freeform stuff. So I think
okay.
So the freeform. So this is people so this is people who said autism in the freeform stuff. What I find really interesting here is, you might not think much about like kind of visual impairments, but I assume that would also like cover like having glasses or whatever, So don't you think so, Xander?
50% of people over 40 need assistance to see.
Maybe it's my ableism.
So I think
it's my ableism shining through.
So I
look at these boys.
I think that just needing glasses, if that were included in there, consistently, I would expect way more than 4%.
Yeah, fair enough. Theo has his own little icon. Source. Oh, how did you get here? Yeah. JavaScript. Yeah. So I follow JavaScript Weekly.
Fireship. Nice.
Yeah.
Slack sent me.
well, there's more Microsoft
Oh,
Teams
Microsoft
than Slack,
Teams.
so I don't know what that says about
Let
JavaScript.
it be known that I admonish Teams in all of its versions, even the new one.
Yeah, me too, and I've gotten in
makes
trouble
me
before.
sad. It makes me sad.
I've gotten in trouble
Like,
before.
It just makes me sad.
Yeah. All right. Let's look at libraries. So
What's a Webpack? Is that like a Rosetta Stone from another generation? Xandor, do you know what a Webpack is?
a Webpack.
Oh goodness.
It's interesting.
I remember having to do stuff with Webpack before Create React App was around.
Yeah, same here. Well, you
think
had
I
to
remember-
set up Babel yourself, yeah? Yeah. I remember setting up static site generation with Webpack. That I never want to do that ever in my life again.
The last time I hand wrote Webpack was in 2014. Maybe just go back up to that that changes over time graph. It's
Oh,
kinda
this one.
interesting.
Yeah.
I wanna see what's happening with Vite. Your Webpack just takes like a sharp
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
everyone wants to use it, and then like nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope.
Yeah. Interesting that you see the same with React as well.
Where-
Is there anything
yeah.
that has risen actually? Ionic.
Did we skip a section?
Oh no. It's just like this same stuff, just represented.
No,
in a
I mean
different-
like there's a features section.
Oh yes, we did actually. Sorry, my bad.
I'm following along on my screen as well.
Yeah.
I was very confused.
So okay, let's talk about features. So null is coalescing. So basically, for those that don't know, that is basically if you do this thing.
They have a little if you click on nullish coalescing in the browser, they have a little pop-up of what it is.
Oh,
Some
okay.
examples.
Yeah. So it's if you do this thing where, so basically one of the pain points of the current kind of two pipes like OR is that it falls back on things that are false-ish. So things like zero, an empty string. Yeah, that 0 one has bitten me in the butt so many times before.
Especially in like JSX.
Yeah.
I've seen people go like if array or array length or the render component, and there's like zeros all over people's
Yes.
UIs.
So this is really nice. So this is, if I understand correctly, it's only for null and undefined, correct?
Yeah. So those together are considered nullish.
Yes.
So the same way we have true C and false C,
Yes.
null and undefined are nullish, which is why nullish coalescing. Because if you look at PHP, for example, they call it null coalescing.
Yes.
Because they don't have two null values.
Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, KOTOR. That would have its own name.
Yeah.
Null and undefined. Their tour's name is nullish.
Yeah. So I'm actually surprised by how many people actually use this.
I use it all the time. I love it.
Same here. But like I've actually, I thought like not a lot of people knew about it. I'm just sad that there isn't one that includes false as well. Because a lot of times I want false, I want null, and I want undefined, but I don't want 0. But I guess like from a language design perspective, nullish makes more sense. But more often than not, I just want to exclude 0 and an empty string.
Make a function, Make a function.
Screw that. Dynamic importing. I can't say that I actually use dynamic importing. I've obviously played around with it.
Very useful.
Do you use it in prod?
Yes, since about 2018, when it was still just like a Webpack thing that you could do. Basically, like the most useful part of dynamic importing is, let's say you have a Holy Grail layout and you've got your sidebar with like different modules. Let's say you do a platform, HRIS platform. You've got like employees and leave and whatever. If you do dynamic imports for the actual page components for each of those things, they become different bundles. And if you land on the dashboard, it doesn't have to load the pages. And you can do smart stuff like if the user starts navigating to links to those bundles, you preload them. But it like dynamic import is the one thing that can like take 10 megabyte JavaScript bundles and turn them into like 1 megabyte main bundles with like 1 megabyte. Like it's not really solving the problem of people shipping fat bundles. But it allows
you're just eating those bundles in smaller chunks. Yeah,
it does soften the blow. Definitely does soften the blow.
So I'm curious whether things like Next and so forth do that automatically on a route basis. Yes. So I assume like dynamic importing is more powerful when you're using something like Create React App or Vite or something like that.
So to be clear, a dynamic import turning into like causing code splitting is a feature of the default setup of the kind of like if you take Vite's React template and that kind of thing. It doesn't. So there, your bundler does need to do that, and then with React, that's one of the reasons why one of the first dispense use cases was React Lazy, so that you could actually do that. And certainly doing this at the root, especially like your top level roots, is a great first step. But there are other use cases. So, for example, if you consider
file system routing, maybe.
Well, there's also like if you know about Google's lib phone number, right? So honestly, if you need a auto format or parse or normalize or validate, although you should probably not do that one, but parse or normalize or auto format like phone numbers, Google's lib phone number is the there's the best one hands down. But if you get like the full featured one, it's quite large. So what you can do is whichever component kind of like needs that, you must dynamically import that, right? Or that component should be dynamically imported. And that way, that means it's only kind of like loaded for the bit of UI that actually needs it, as opposed to, because if you have like some top level route that uses lib phone number, then for whatever reason, like that route takes way longer to load.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious whether, like, would there ever be a case where you would rather just, like, hands down leave it to something like Next, and you can actually do more harm than like by trying to like do dynamic importing?
Well, you can cause waterfalls, right? Like, so if there's if there's like a big chain of things that are dynamically imported, and there's nothing that tells the browser to prefetch the things further down the chain, you get a loading waterfall.
Will it always resolve during on client side?
Well, so without any prefetching hints, the browser doesn't know that you're dynamically importing something else until it's loaded the first bundle and then parsed it.
Okay.
And then started executing it, and then it must wait, and it waits for execution as well. If you've got a whole bunch of these like imports like sequentially one below the other, and you're not doing like a promise.all or whatever, you're just awaiting them, then it'll load the first one and all of its dependencies, and only once that resolves does it carry on loading the rest. So you can cause a loading waterfall.
I see.
Be careful of that.
Yes. Yeah. So private fields, I don't use classes, so I can't really speak to this. I'm actually surprised by how many people use them.
They're very useful for libraries. Like if you're doing like they're very useful for verse, for example. Like if you really want to encapsulate stuff, and there's some stuff that you really just don't want people to call outside of like a protected instance of the thing, like having private fields is very useful.
Is it?
For libraries, like if you're building a thing that's going to go on npm and random people are going to use it. A great example of like what would have benefited from a private field is do not use this or you will get fired.
In React, in the dev
React,
tools,
right? Like,
fair enough.
There are legitimate use cases
Yeah.
for encapsulation.
Yeah, but so this is more interface related than actual, logic related, because I guess like I would generally just use a closure.
Yes and no, because the object enumeration methods, like enumerating over the keys of an object, private fields won't show up unless you ask for them, and you can ask for just private fields as well.
Right? Okay, so, I didn't know that. Okay,
there's
useful runtime stuff that comes from this as well.
Also, with regards to subtypes, I believe that I may or may not be correct. I forget. I know there's something along where, like with private fields, where you can let like subclasses like access some of the private stuff, but not others.
Isn't that protected?
So that's
protected. No. So
but
that's
like private fields have protected access in JavaScript.
Well, there's like a way to do that at runtime as well, because again, like protected, but that keyword in TypeScript does nothing. Like, I mean, it gives you type errors, right? But at runtime, it does nothing.
Yeah.
Well,
logical.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Very brief. Because prototypical inheritance, private field, there is no real protected construct in a prototypical language. A private field is inherently a protected field in a prototypical language.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. On the same page.
So logical assignment, I actually don't use it that much, but that's
man. So you can use it with the knowledge coalescing thing as well. It's very useful. I use this regularly. Like regularly.
Really, I don't do that many reassignments.
Whenever you're doing like anything dynamic programming or caching or whatever, like
this is also
dynamic programming algorithm benefits from this. Like just syntactically, it just makes like a 3-line thing a 1-line thing.
It's also quite useful if you have like a whole bunch of defaults that you need to set or assign.
Okay. Yeah, I don't use it that much. I think I generally resolve fallbacks and things. Like, so if we're talking React here, I generally resolve fallbacks at a templating level instead of like as the data flows through my UI. So I don't use it that much. So I generally don't assign default. I don't use defaults or fallbacks when I'm assigning things. Instead, I use it when I'm calling things or using things. So I guess it's just a style of programming. Cool. There's a question here about, since Skulk mentioned not coding with classes, how do you implement OOP principles otherwise? I don't use classes either, just mostly interfaces, to be honest. Just interested to hear your thoughts. Ooh, do you guys want to get into this?
Zanko has been triggered.
I like. So I'll quickly try and speak to this, and then we can unpack that a bit. So, I think one thing to keep in mind is that I think there's two things that I think is worth mentioning up front, and the one is that like there's a lot of conflation when it comes to OOP and classes and a lot of that stuff. So an OOP language or an OOP approach doesn't necessarily need classes. Classes can form part of it. And also there's a lot of like conflation with kind of a very specific style of OOP, which is kind of like this whole thing of like you have a dog and you have a mammal and you have a kind of this kind of C# style of like OOP. So I think like also
I don't think we should be mean to C# people. Like
okay, no, I'm not mean to C#.
Code in this world.
No. I think the reason, like, but I think like we have to be real that style has become so predominant because of the popularity of C#.
Java.
And Java. Well, those two kind of I use interchangeably here.
Java much more so, right? Like.
Yeah,
Java,
fair enough.
much
Yeah.
more.
So, but those two, I'm not. So, I think
That's the place.
yes. So, OOP principles. I also want to say, who the hell knows what those are anymore? Like, so what are the pillars? The pillars are.
Are the objects that send messages to each other?
No,
yes
no,
or
no. But if you
Then
think about
OOP.
the pillars of OOP is what, like polymorphism, inheritance. What are the other ones? Encapsulation. You do all those. You do all those, like even in functional programming as well. I think you actually do more polymorphism in functional programming. You just do a different type. Yeah.
Well, there is no
abstraction.
There's
the other
just
one.
there's just a signature, right? Like thing acts as other thing versus I.
But that's still polymorphism.
They're well, no, it's not. It's not like the polymorphism is the very uniquely OOP thing. I can act in place of this thing. Like the core difference is objects send messages in OOP. In functional things, call other things. Right? So the signature, you're calling a signature. Calling something versus sending a message to something are subtly different.
Yeah,
but critically different.
I think it's a semantic issue because, like, to me, what does polymorphism mean? Polymorphism means that you can like use something. You structure your code in a way.
But that's like, it's not about use. It acts as versus
Sure,
being used.
But don't you have that with like monads and stuff as well?
No, monads.
So
just
no, type classes
state.
type classes very definitely is exactly that. So if you look at Haskell's classes, it's saying, oh, hey, like you've got whatever type, and it says, I implement this specific interface, right? And I stick to it. Like the Haskell's kind of like they specifically say it that way. And in fact, that is favoring composition over inheritance, because you effectively can have whatever types you want, and you can implement a whole bunch of different interfaces as long as there's no naming conflicts between them. And they can be all of those without necessarily having, so it's basically just mixins. Think about it that way. Or if you're familiar with Rust, they call it traits. Instead of having to do it only kind of like via inheritance. Look, it's a little bit difficult to talk about that because some languages have structural typing only, really, right? And then others have nominal typing. So in nominal typing, inheritance is kind of not just like you have to inherit just in order to get the language to understand that you do the thing, right? Like it's like not good enough.
It can't look at the duck and be like, oh, it looks like a duck.
Yeah, exactly.
But my problem with OOP.
Maybe answer the question.
All right. Which like
finish what you're saying, Xandor, and then
right.
answer the question.
So for me, right, like the problem with object-oriented programming is basically that, and I'm talking about I'm not talking about like, hey, you happen to use objects that have methods. I mean, as a small scale and large scale architectural approach, you use like the proper object-oriented programming. And with object-oriented programming, like, so you mentioned sending a message versus calling a function. So technically speaking, like what you should be doing when you're sending a message is the value that you're, yes, it's like conceptually it's different. Under the hood though, most of the time you are calling a method. But what you should be doing is sending something that's immutable, right? Immutable. The mutation of state should be internal to each specific object, and then the messages that they send ought to be immutable, so that you don't have mutation of state like being put in different places. What a result of this is, in order for an object to send a message, it needs to another object. It needs to have a reference to that object. It needs to have an address or like a handle or something. And the only way you can do that without mutation is by giving it that information at the object's instantiation time. And if you stick to that, you have kind of an instantiation graph. Yeah. That's where you get like a God object whose responsibility is to create the universe, and a constellation of minor deities around it that are responsible for different subsystems of the program, and so on and so forth.
Now that's a very solid argument, but a recent point I've had made on this is like that God object doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing if you can think of that God object as a message bus.
Yeah, but it is. But what ends up happening as a result...
Most people don't.
But what ends up happening as a result, as soon as you have any cross-cutting concerns, and there's a lot of those, right? In fact, a lot of non-functional requirements end up being cross-cutting concerns. So now all of the objects have to bucket brigade the messages around. It's like prop drilling in React, like with no context available. So they have to bucket brigade those messages up and down. In practice, at this point, a lot of people go, screw that. And they just like start putting references across. And when you do that, you've got shared mutable state. Yep. And at this point, your encapsulation is no longer real.
Yeah.
But I find with object-oriented programming, you're damned if you do, because the ossified call hierarchy, and this is even if you don't do any inheritance, the ossified call hierarchy ends up being a problem, or promiscuously shared mutable state with like cumbersome interfaces at this point over them.
So let's just bring this back in. Yes. So first and foremost, Ben, do you want to tell us about that little peach sign next to your name? Huh?
Yeah. So let me think about it. Yes. So.
Well, there's a question of whether you're still with Operativa.
Yeah. So Operativa has been acquired by Peach Payments as of May.
There we go.
So this is all
right.
Gazetted
So
all the things. So
yes,
formal press releases and things will happen at some point. But we're very, very happy to be on board with the Peach team. We think we're going to be able to affect some really positive change in the African payments market. It's the winning team. It's the winning team. Like if someone asks you to go play for the Springboks, you go play for the Springboks, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll first see whether Peach will sponsor this before I say whether they're the winning team or not. No comment from Ben. All right. So back to the question. So I think, so if I were to try and answer this as eloquently and concisely as possible, I actually think a lot of what is considered OOP principles are just general software principles. Encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism. Like, so if you take polymorphism to mean, hey, you should try and make the things you build work with as many things as possible, and with as abstract notion of the things that it interacts with as possible. I see those as general programming principles. So then the question is, if you're not using classes, how do you implement OOP principles? I would say we just implement them. You don't need classes. Abstraction without classes, you use closures. You use like kind of
so
props.
Closures are encapsulation.
Yeah.
Closures are encapsulation. Abstraction is fundamentally through composition. Things like type classes give you Liskov.
So the Liskov substitution principle in functional programming is often referred to as like covariance and contravariance.
Yes.
But because the mathematicians got there first, so all the names are scary, but it's really not that hard.
Yeah.
My feeling is that apart from the inheritance bit, right? So you have abstraction, encapsulation, and polymorphism. My opinion is that functional programming does all of these things better, way better. And one of the reasons why is if you look at the polymorphism bit, so I shared a link on our, I don't know if Skull can share that later, but there's actually this idea that in functional programming, the APIs are kind of universal. There's this thing called map, which you know from arrays, right? So in functional programming, there's many different kinds of structures, and many of them have a map. In fact,
Yeah.
So what they call that is, like, think of it as a mappable, right? So for arrays, that means do this thing for all your members, and for most collections it does. But if you have, let's say, a promise, which is often called a future, right? It's like they'll have a map as well, right? So in JavaScript, we decided to call it then instead of map. But in many functional programming languages, future has a map. And that just means, like, when you have a value, run this function on it. And there's other types, like there's an error type, which is like if you have a success. And what that does is, like, your business logic no longer needs to care about the incidental details of, like, are we in success or error? Have we arrived yet? Like, are we one or multiple? Blah, 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 blah. Your function is just like, do a thing. And then there's these structures that take care of the incidental details of how to do a thing to a specific type of thing. Anyway, what that means is that, like, as you change stuff, as things become more complicated, like, you've got a cleaner separation of concerns. Refactoring is easier. When it comes to abstraction, this also makes things easier, because one of the things that I think is interesting about object-oriented programming, and you have, like, the design patterns. And the reason they're patterns and not just a library you can npm install is because they have to be, like, specifically applied and interpreted for, like, your specific problem. And that's because of the nature of object-oriented programming, those patterns and those abstractions are inherently leaky to some degree. And my experience with functional programming is that is rarely ever as big of a problem. And then when it comes to encapsulation, again, closures are a poor man's object and objects are a poor man's closure. So you have that anyways. But if you're using immutable data, even when it's not encapsulated, that's rarely ever a big issue, because it doesn't change out from underneath you.
Yeah.
So we're 42 minutes.
Anyway,
yes. So I want to move on. So
let's go.
So just a follow-up question to that would be: is it incorrect of a business to enforce strict OOP principles with classes in the application? I would say no. I would say, like, I don't know, whatever, like, whatever the team agrees on. If like, it's better, and it's better to have some enforceable standards than not, even if those standards are strange. If we amongst the team decide we're not allowed to use the word red in our variables, sucks. But at least
agree and disagree with that, right? So I fundamentally think enforcing standards is bad. I think providing guidance is great. Any kind of policy decision or guidance that a business puts in place is helpful to its engineering team.
Yes.
But the moment you start taking opportunities for ownership and decision making and risk communication away from your engineers, why have them? Why even have them at that point?
I do agree with that.
So
yeah,
guidance over standards is the approach that I tend to advocate for, and that many other people tend to advocate for, that you see inside of things like DevOps culture as well. And SRE culture, it's all about, like, put the useful things down, put the safety nets in place, but people have the authority and the ownership to be able to make different decisions when they make sense. That doesn't mean they can just go off program for no reason. It means you have the responsibility and the accountability for making that decision. OOP in and of itself is not bad. Any kind of shared language inside of an engineering team, whether it's as low level as computer science principles or design patterns, like, conversations that don't need to be had are, for many engineering teams, the most productive gains that you can have. Not having to have a certain conversation over and over and over again, that's what most engineering teams should be optimizing for.
Yeah. So one thing I can, though, say is I would in this specific instance, I would much rather have a team agree that, okay, like all we're going to do modularization by means of classes, and that's what we agree, instead of having a mix of classes and functions and other things and whatever. At the very least, like, I find it useful to just have an agreed upon definition of what is the structure of a thing in our code.
Yeah,
so like in this case, I would say if the alternative, I wouldn't do it, but if the alternative, because I would just enforce functions and closures and actual modules, the actual built-in JavaScript import-export modules, as means to achieve encapsulation and all that stuff. But yeah,
so
if
that's the thing, right? Like,
yeah.
Versus recommending. Like, if you enforce stuff, you're gonna lose your best people. They're gonna leave.
Yeah. But
if you coherently explain why a decision was made in the past and why it is recommended to do so in the future, and give people the choice, then you're setting yourself up for much greater success.
So it depends. So I would say it depends, like, a little bit on the composition of the business that we're talking about. Is this business a 5-man team? Probably. You can, like, because that's a like much different kind of altitude than if you're talking about a business that's got like 1,000 programmers and like hundreds of teams, right? So when you're talking about that, and what is the maturity of the programmers? Do they have in each team senior members that are working like with them like properly? Because if you just have like teams of only juniors, right, which yeah, that happens, right? If you have teams of only juniors, you know what, enforcing standards for the teams that are purely made of juniors is probably going to be a net benefit for the business. The juniors should probably look for other jobs where they have real mentorships, but
depends where you get the standards from, though.
But still, though, right? Like,
so here's a use case.
I still think it's more harmful, right? Because standard is just, you must do this thing in this way. Guidance is, this thing is done under these circumstances for these reasons and can be deviated from under these circumstances, right? Like, it takes a lot more effort for the business to put guidance in place than it takes to put a standard in place. And it's hard. It's hard, right? Like, I know it's hard because I do it for a pretty large team. But it drives fundamentally better outcomes, and this isn't just my opinion, man. This is fundamental to DevOps culture, to SRE culture, to moving towards better DORA outcomes. And those kinds
it's also that it's analogous to the concept of paved paths. If you have like a platform team, right? So platform team is like they've got specific expertise in a specific like set of technologies. Let's assume like there's a team that knows cloud stuff really well, or that's great at Kubernetes-y kind of things. The product or feature teams are expected to normally use the things the platform team has created or documented or recommended to go forward, but those product and feature teams are still autonomous. So they can decide to do something different, but now it's not a paved path. So it's one of those, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And they have to figure that out. So, but they need to be genuinely empowered and genuinely held accountable for how that ends up going. Yeah. Right? That's the other side of the story.
Okay, but we probably need to move on. All right.
I wasn't disagreeing with what you were saying. I was just nitpicking something specific because it's.
If I were to summarize my viewpoint on this in a single sentence, it would be that if you can explain meaningfully why something is a standard, then good stuff. If you can't, bad stuff. Period. That's it. So your question is it good to enforce classes? Why? If they can't tell you, then it's not a good thing. Okay. If they can give you a convincing reason, then it is. Let's get back to JS. To literally the very first section, the very first part of the JS state. So logical. Okay, so hashbang. Hashbang is mostly just for binary stuff, is it not?
No, for scripts, it's
Yeah.
not binary.
Well, not binary. I mean, actually not
Bang.
stuff that you're running, like not like actual client-side code or like a server, node server or something.
It's for interpreters, right? Like if something finds the file, which interpreter should I be running this under?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's strange to me that this is actually even part of the answers.
I've been adding that to things, especially anything that goes in a bin directory has had a shebang on top of it.
So that's kind of what I meant by binary, but not the right word. Yeah. Okay, Eru, this is amazing. I use this all the time, everywhere.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
Cause. Okay,
So
if you see this and you don't know what this is,
feature.
if you see this and you don't know what this is, go Google this right now and start using
It's a
it.
great
That is
feature.
amazing.
I know some of its friends. Absolutely amazing feature.
Yeah. The best feature. Some say the very best ever. Like some people say. It's huge. Okay. String features. Replace all, match all. I don't know. Maybe I'm just old school. I just it's easier for me to just write regex.
You're just like put this little G on the regular expression.
It's actually easier for me to just write regex than to memorize all this stuff.
The counter argument is there is actually a performance thing that I don't ever like making the performance argument, but I've literally had this before.
How big are your strings, buddy?
Well, setting up a regular expression like that inside of a loop. So let's say you're doing a loop and you're doing dot replace and you put the regular expression inside of it. If you're taking a string as an argument and you're having to turn the string into an irregular expression with new regex, that costs something. If you're not smart enough to pull out and put somewhere and only do that calculation once, and you do it like a few 100,000 times, that will be slow. This is more like it's a pits of success thing, right? Like the pits of success are bigger with replace all than without them, and I can support it.
Sure, in principle. I'm just too lazy to memorize all the stuff, like starts with, ends with, like all of that. I'm just going to pop a regex in there. But I do hear what you're saying. Yeah.
So the thing is that I end up using regexes so often just to find specific bits of code in my code base.
Yeah.
or even in the file that I'm on. I'm
sorry, Zandor.
I'm so used to using them anyway.
Yeah. But I think, I guess, that's just because you couldn't do this when we learned JavaScript. If you're learning JavaScript today, this might be a lot easier than trying to figure out how regex even works. But that's why you just ask ChatGPT to create the regex for you. I'm not saying it's a good idea.
By the way, regular expressions could be an attack vector, usually only for denial of service attacks, because the kind of cyclomatic complexity of your regex can explode with certain operations.
Okay, we have 5 minutes.
Take really long.
Okay, let's not dive into security.
Or we can just call it a loss.
No, I want to. Can we at least work through the features? All right.
Okay.
So find last. These are really cool.
Two sorted to.
So they're the immutable. They're the immutable versions. Two spliced.
I already regret trying to give up. You thanks, God.
These are really cool. Find last. This is basically just the opposite of find. So it's kind of, what do you call it? It's greedy.
Yeah, instead of dot reverse dot find or whatever. This is great.
Yeah. So this is just a quality of life thing. With
that looks weird. I have no idea what that is.
I have no. Well, apparently 11% of people use it. So we're the dumbasses that don't know what this is.
You add stuff to it.
Okay. This is to
Array.
change a value at an index, but it does so by giving you a new one rather than mutating it.
Yeah, so instead of splice.
Oh, this
think
seems
of-
dangerous.
No.
So that says change the second. What? No, change the element at index 2, so the third element, with by the value 6. Like replace whatever's there with the value 6.
Traditionally, you would have had to use splice, and splice mutated the array in place, right? With gives you a new one.
But there's two
This is
spliced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but splice can do more than one thing. It can also just delete an element, right?
I guess this is just like quality of life thing.
With
Then
is literally like swap at index. It's useful. It also goes below the sea level, which is huge, right? Like that's
sea level.
well, like things that go below the sea level go fast.
Yeah, I know. It just took a moment for me to realize
like,
what you're talking about.
For like operating on indexes in big lists, go fast mean important.
Yeah, gotta go fast. Top level await. I don't use it that much just because I'm just in such a habit to just do a big init function that I just call it.
You can open a node REPL and await immediately now, right?
Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice.
Or
just,
if you're an ESM module land and you need to conditionally include something in your bundle, top level await is really nice.
What's an ESM,
That's true.
Sandor? Is it purely something that brings pain instead of the benefits that it promises to
You might know it's
bring,
good for
or
the
Is it
CJS.
something that I will actually be able to exclusively use in 2047?
You might know its brother CJS. And then you might know the
CJ's such a good guy.
but then you might know the really weird like uncle that is called AMD. Or what was it? Yeah, AMD. Yeah. Geez, those were some times. Huh?
In system
JavaScript.
Remember Bauer. Remember Bauer.
Remember the Bower. WebSocket. Yo! Why are so many people using WebSockets? What are you guys doing?
They are. Wait, I have my.
They're building chatbots. They're building chatbots.
I have a Gen Z slang list that I can reference
WebSockets.
here.
So
I believe
why-
WebSockets have res.
Oh man, yeah.
I believe WebSockets have res. They are 8 or they 8.
No cap, bro. No cap.
Yeah. They're opt by fetch.
I'm pretty sure you're sounding way smoother in your head than you are. The WebSockets have a res. Yeah, a res.
One res.
Why are more people making WebSockets than progressive web apps? That's crazy. Why are more people?
Progressive web apps are for people like Skulk.
No,
I wonder how
true,
many people know about service end events and whether or not they could actually be using those instead of WebSockets.
No, like WebSockets are cool. I use WebSockets.
Oh,
like, a ton.
the like service end events with the keep alive connection stuff. That's
So
really cool.
service end events, it's like WebSockets except it's unidirectional instead of bidirectional. So it's just the service ending you stuff. And like the idea is that so HTMX actually has support for service end events.
Yeah, but like, I guess if you're using it, like it implies you're physically writing it.
Well, so it might also be used as a way to like do real time stuff, the WebSocket stuff. It's probably like got a lot to do with people building real time apps where something's changed and now they're updating as a result.
Yeah, I just find it weird that what's this? 39%. There's only this is just such a big number to me for WebSockets. Like look at web animations, 18%. But anyway, pain point, static typing. Yeah, I don't want to dive into that now. That's just going to be like an entire hour discussion.
Look at CSM.
Yeah, and CJS, like I said. the bros, the module bros. TypeScript support, browser support, performance, error handling, async programming, choice overload, security, handling objects.
I'm impressed how low, like small the percentage of async programming is. I think async await has really helped people out.
No, it's saying pain points.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I feel like had you asked that before async awaits,
have you asked that 5 years ago?
Like async programming would be way higher on that list.
That is true.
On that bombshell, I do need to bow out for today's session.
All right.
Safari.
We made it about 20% in. I think we're getting
into the first page.
We're getting better at this. Thank you for entertaining me, and I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was just disagreeing with you.
Fight.
It's like I'm not disagreeing with like you as a person, just with what you said.
Like you're a cool guy. Your opinions are just awful.
Why do you even invite me to these things?
Yeah, because you bring that sweet peach.
I can bring that sweet peach. Okay.
All right, guys. On that note, let's end it there. Chat to everyone again in a month. Cool. Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.